So, good morning, everybody. Very happy to see so many faces here today. I think the topic is very interesting, so I hope I will be up to your expectations. Something about myself. So, Monica Battistella, I cover the position of Sustainability Manager at Taghleef Industries. And Taghleef Industries is not only the company that is sponsoring this stage together with OPRL, it's also one of the global leader in the production of BOPP films, cast films, and also bio-based films such as PLA, and not only. We are present in different applications such as industrial applications, flexible packaging, labels, graphic arts, among the others. The company is quite recent as a group. It was born in 2007, so next year it will be our 20th anniversary. And we've been steadily growing through the years, as you can see, until the last acquisition, which happened in 2018 for a total capacity of 500,000 kilotons in terms of production. We are spread globe all the world, in all the continents, with 11 production sites. We have advanced R&D lab centers. We are almost 3,000 people altogether, all the employees coming from different sites of the world. This is one of the best part of our job, being together in different cultures, bringing different values and perspective into the company. And our products are sold also all over the world. Here you have at a glance the presence of our production sites, distribution centers. So as you can see, we are really present all over the world. I mentioned to you we are in flexible packaging, we have label films and technical films, and these are the brands for which we are known mainly in the market. These brands stay for specific value of the products that we bring to our customers. So films like high barrier, films which are bio-based and compostable films, as with recycled content, graphic arts applications. I will not enter into the details of this today because my scope today is to share with you some of the insights, some about the regulation, which is going to be mostly impactful for the European business in the coming year. And not only for Europe, but also for anyone who has a business who's selling into the European market. So I'm talking about the packaging regulation. Everybody's talking about it as PPWR, so definitely a regulation which has been set by Europe and is no longer a directive, because the scope is really to have something strong which is coming into force for the single member countries and can be applied as it is. So the journey of this regulation started back in 2022 when the first draft was actually brought to the stakeholders of this industry, and it was a long draft with different components, with different measures which have been discussed. So amendments, different proposals were submitted during the 2023, and the final result was back last year in 2024 when the last version was actually approved, so it got the final approval. So what happened last year basically? In April, there was the start of the corrigendum procedure, so the final version of the legislation started to be translated into each single member state language. And it was a legal process, not simply a translation process, because it implies that words have different legal meaning in different languages. So it was a very, let's say, sensitive process, which lasted quite long. And in November last year, the legislation, so the regulation got the approval, was endorsed by the ENVI committee and by the EU Parliament. Last 16th of December, there was the final adoption of the European Council, and last month, so on the 22nd of January, there was a publication in the EU official journal. What happened afterwards? Well, this regulation has just entered into force this week. So 2 days ago, on the 11th of February, the regulation has entered into force to be applied officially in August next year, on the 12th of August. So applicability starting from 2026 next year. What is the packaging waste regulation in brief, so in a summary? It's a regulation that is going to be applied throughout the European Union, so everything which is packaged and enters the European Union will be to be compliant to the regulation, and that includes also imported goods. So no matter if you are not part of the EU, if you are selling into the EU, you're going to be affected as well. It applies to all packaging materials, so someone may think it applies to plastic packaging only. That's not true. It applies to all the packaging material. There are some measures which are relevant for plastic packaging only, but generally speaking, the regulation is for all the material. It targets a reduction in terms of packaging waste, very important. It requires eco-modulation, EPR fees based on recyclability. So this is a very strong and important measure to facilitate and to trigger the switch from non-recyclable packaging to recyclable one. So EPR fees is definitely one of the tools which can actually create the basis for the change and the transition. Also, it introduces sustainability requirements which become essential requirements, which translated means it's a must to be on the market. It's not a nice to have. It's not something that I can go without and just pay a fee and I'm still allowed to be on the market. This is not the case. You must be compliant without excuses. What are these essential requirements? First of all packaging must be designed to be recycled. Not only must be designed to be recycled and recycled at scale, there will be mandatory PCR content for plastic packaging, so this is a specific requirement only for plastic packaging. There's measures for packaging minimization and waste reduction. There will be a part which is related to the presence of substances of concern in the packaging, which is not only related to substances which may be dangerous, let's call it like that, or concerning for the health of people, but also may hinder the recyclability process itself. There are reuse targets, introduction of reuse targets. There are specific bans for single-use plastic applications, introduction of mandatory compostable applications for specific types of packaging, and last but not least, very important, is harmonized labeling and marking requirements. So we've been listening yesterday to OPRL talking about the measures related to labeling, how important it is for the consumers to be aware of what the label is actually showing onto the packaging, what to do and where to dispose of your product. This is definitely one of the key measures which will be introduced by the packaging waste regulation itself. And very important, last but not least, is that this regulation does not only apply to B2C packaging, it applies to B2B packaging as well. So very, very important for all these stakeholders in this industry. So we started and saying that all packaging must be designed for final recycling. When? Starting from the 1st of January 2030 or 2 years from the delegated acts entering into force, so the latest date. What's in the delegated acts? Design for recycling criteria will be in the delegated acts and will be developed by the European Commission through delegated acts for each packaging category. So it's like, in our case, PP flexible, natural, colored, it will be PE, it will be paper, so every single category will have its own design for recycling criteria developed. Then we have the second criteria, which is to be recycled at scale, which means basically that from 1st of January 2035, or 5 years after the entry into force of implementing acts defining the methodology to assess the recyclability at scale, each packaging category, films, flexible, aluminum, cardboard, paper, has to reach a minimum 55% recycling rate at EU level on an annual basis, and this is the condition for a packaging to be defined as recycled at scale. So this is very challenging, very important, especially for some, let's say, material categories. What are the recyclability requirements? We said needs to be designed to be finally recycled. There will be a grading, A, B, C, which is basically defining in which single category the packaging is actually entering, so it belongs to. And only packaging belonging to these categories, A, B, C, will be allowed to go onto the market as of 2030. The second step is 2035. We defined it as recycled at scale, but 2038 is bringing one additional, let's say, step, which is only packaging belonging to category A and B will be allowed to go onto the market. So the recyclability performance needs to be higher and better in respect to what is required for the threshold of 2030. The compliance to recyclability will have to be demonstrated by technical documentation, so it's not sufficient that you have a self-assessment and saying, hey, my packaging is recyclable, be sure you can go into the market. And there are some packaging which will be excluded from this criteria, so we will still be allowed to go onto the market without the obligation to be compliant to this recyclability, design for recyclability at the end of its life. Although I must say that some of the stakeholders in these industries which are listed here are nonetheless already working to make a transition and to improve on the quality and recyclability of their packaging, despite the lack of obligation from the point of view of a legal requirement. So what is the recyclability assessment and what do the different grading A, B, C correspond to? So we have an assessment which is expressed here in terms of percentages. But what I want to underline is that this assessment is not based on weight. So to be clear, it's not that you can actually identify the amount and the weight of the different components which make up your packaging and be comfortable with the fact that some of these components are less than 30%, and so it's fine, I can go into the market. It doesn't work like that. The assessment is more complex and is given by the combination of the different elements which actually make up the final packaging. A very typical example that I always bring up is PVDC coated film. So what's the amount of the PVDC coating on a film? It's almost nothing. It's much less definitely than 30%. But nonetheless, that kind of film will be defined as non-recyclable because it's actually hindering the recycling process, both in mechanical streams and chemical recycling streams. So to be clear, we are not talking about weight here. And I like to underline this point because I already start seeing customers approaching us and asking for the declaration of the different ingredients which make up the packaging. It's much more complex than this. And actually parameters and how to assess the recyclability has not been defined yet. So to start discussing the point right now about the different combinations is a little bit useless because we don't have the final details about how it will be assessed. On the top of the recyclability, we also have a recycled content target, which for context-sensitive packaging will start with 10% in 2030 to go up to 25% in 2040. And non-context sensitive, it will be 35, 2030, and 65 in 2040. We also have some exemptions from this type of criterion requirement, which is that if you have a packaging, and your packaging is a combination, for instance, of paper and plastic, let's assume a typical case where actually the plastic part and the plastic component is given the functionality, is given the sellability to the paper packaging. If the plastic component in that packaging is more than 5%, that 5% will need to have a PCR recycled content as well. If it's less, you're exempted. Then compostable plastic packaging is exempted from that, pharma, medical devices, transport of dangerous goods as well. It's important also to underline that in order to achieve the recycled content target, post-industrial is not considered at all. So it will only be post-consumer, and it's quite reasonable and quite understanding because if the scope is actually to improve on the quality of your packaging and to improve on the whole recycling process, well, then we need to have a post-consumer so that what you get as a household waste is better design for recyclability. You have better design for the infrastructure which need to collect, to sort and recycle the packaging. Packaging minimization is also going the same direction and following the same scope of a better recyclability. Why is that? The final scope is to reduce the amount of littering. We don't want any waste. packaging waste, whatever waste it is, we want to reduce it. And when we use or we make a packaging which is using an excessive amount of material without any need for the final safety and security of the packaging, what we use is actually something wrong. We should use less. So what the regulation is going to do is to introduce specific criteria so that if you have, let's say, a packaging for a biscuit and which is suitable to contain 1 kilo biscuits and you only have 500 grams, that's not that okay. So if you still adopt that type of packaging, you need to justify it for protection purposes, technical reasons, but you need to be able to actually prove that you really need to have a packaging which is bigger than the real content it has inside. So you need to demonstrate your compliance. So by the 11th of February, 2 years after the entering into force, the European Commission will request the European Standardization Committee, so the CEN, CEN-CENELEC, to prepare the harmonized standard actually to define the criteria and how to measure the compliance to the specific criteria. Next to this, we also have waste prevention target for each member state, which goes into the direction of having specific percentages of packaging waste reduction target. The baseline for measuring these is 2018. Okay, so it's quite challenging if you consider that the amount of packaging which is put onto the market is anyway a little bit growing year by year. So this 5% is more than real 5%, if we put it in different words. I mentioned that there will be a specific chapter dedicated to the substances of concern. Right now, many people are talking about PFAS, which will be banned if their presence is above certain limits. But the thing is that as of today, the analytical method to actually detect the presence of the PFAS is not being established yet. So it's not final how to measure this. It's not even final to detect if we're talking about substances which are intentionally or not intentionally added. So what we see as a reaction on the market is that many customers are already asking, we want PFAS-free, just to be safe, just to be sure. We are not waiting for any definition about the threshold. We don't want to hear about how you're going to investigate and to measure the presence or not presence. We just want a solution which is PFAS-free. And what I would like to tell you is that solutions are already possible and available in the market. The compliance, even in this case, needs to be demonstrated technically, so with proper documentation. There's a use target as well, which is applicable to beverages. So starting from 2030, final distributors, the retailers must ensure that at least 10% of all alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages in sales packaging is sold in reusable packaging within a system for reuse. Then here, there's a definition of aspirational target, which means it's not compulsory. Probably some of the measures will be discussed just to check how it is feasible to implement them, how it's working, what it's creating for the whole value chain to implement some such reuse services and infrastructures. There are some examples, which you see here, for highly perishable beverages as well. Even in this case, in 2 years' time, the Commission will publish the guideline explaining in more details the products which are in scope of reuse. So you can see there's a lot which we need to be defined in the tiny details through the delegated acts, so the secondary part of the legislation, which we can expect would be as huge as the main regulation itself, because many of the details needs to be checked, and better explained, and better defined. We also have a target for use when it comes to transport. So we have a 40% reuse transport into 2030 to reach 70% in 2040. Ideally, e-commerce is included in this as well. Operators who have multiple sites in use should use only reusable transport between one site and the other. And also, if you are in a B2B business, whenever you're delivering something to your domestic country, so to your domestic customers, this should also come only in reusable transport measures as well. Then we have a refill target as well, starting from 2030. The final distributors with a sale area of more than 400 square meters shall endeavor, so this is not a must, but shall endeavor, to dedicate at least 10% of their sales area to refill station. That can include food or non-food products. So this is part of the PPWR as well. Packaging restrictions, products which will be banned starting from the 1st of January 2030. You have some pictures here which are trying to provide example of what is no longer allowed. So we have collation films and shrink wrap. Normally these ones are used also to wrap together more than one unit of product to kind of encourage customers to buy like multiple pieces, like 2 bottles or 3 bottles of shampoo instead of one. Then fruits and vegetables which come in a weight of less than 1.5 kilos will no longer be allowed to come into the containers on the net, so net bags, trays and containers will be banned. Then we have the single-use packaging for fruits and beverages which are filmed and consumed directly in the HoReCa stream, so hotel, restaurants, catering services. We have also packaging for stuff like ketchup, mayonnaise, cream for the coffee, which will be banned as well directly in the HoReCa sector. And then all the single-use packaging for cosmetics, hygiene, toiletry products that you find in hotels, for instance. So you will have in that case as well the refill solutions. Compostable applications, I mentioned that for some items, EU has clearly identified the opportunity and the benefit to make the transition to compostable solutions. So we have sticky labels which are applied to fruits and vegetables. That makes quite a lot of sense because these products are collected together with the organics, so the food waste fraction, and if you put a plastic in that, that's not good because in the end it will not be composted. So you need to use plastic, but which is certified for industrial compostability or home compostability. Then we have permeable tea, coffee or other beverages bags, non-permeable coffee, tea and other beverages systems single-serve units, coffee capsules which are not in metals and not aluminum, so whatever is in plastic should be compostable, and very light carrier bags. So all these applications need to be put onto the market in compostable solution. This is actually a requirement for market access. As I said, it's not a nice to have, it's something that you must be compliant with. If it's industrially compostable or home compostable, this is more based on the country system itself. Some countries are more advanced in systems like industrial compostabilities, others don't have just the infrastructure, so home compostability can be preferred. But it's also to be said that there's a freedom for the EU member states to add on the top of these applications other applications which they may believe or validate as suitable to go into the compostable streams. And that's left in the freedom and the liberty of the EU member states to decide and to make the proposal until next year. And last but not least, we have the labeling harmonization, which I have anticipated to you and which was discussed yesterday by OPRL as well. So how important it is for consumers to really identify and understand what stays on the packaging itself. And it's not only about the composition, it's not only about the end of life, but it's also about other criteria like recyclability, like recycled content, bio-based content. It may even contain, through a transition to digital methods like the digital passport, information such as the carbon footprint of my product, the LCA of my product, and other different information, everything that I want to add to my packaging in terms of traceability and concerning the material that we are using. When it comes to environmental claims, you may know that there's the Green Claim Directive, and it is very important that whenever you see on a packaging something or a claim which is about the recycled content or the bio-based content, the claim cannot be made if it's just limited to the amount which is required by the law. Okay, because it's not something nice that you have as a stakeholder. This is something that is coming as an enforcement by law. So you can only claim it if it's above the limit which is being set by the law itself. Okay, so the 10%, for instance, the content-sensitive applications cannot become a claim. That's not allowed. What is our perspective as a stakeholder in this industry which is providing to the market DOPP films, which is providing PLA films, home compostable films, industrially compostable films? Well, we have our redesign program And our redesign program is a service which we give to our customers to help them to make the transition from non-recyclable solutions or multi-material solutions to other packaging material which is PP based. We have our real-life portfolio, which includes films with mechanical recycled content, with chemical recycled content. We can help the customers make a transition from, the rigid solution when it comes to the packaging minimization to a flexible solution, and we expect actually a growth in the flexible because the easiest way to declare reduction of waste in terms of weight is to make the transition from rigid to flexibles. And last but not least, as I mentioned, we have our brand, which is Nativia and stands for Industrial and Home Compostable Solutions. Some examples of transitions which we have already helped our customers with. The first example on the left side, the initial structure was a paper alu PE, and it was replaced by PP structure where we provided a high barrier material from our extender portfolio, which was actually able to replace the aluminum foil while keeping the same performance in terms of barrier and shelf life of the final product. The same goes for the biscuits on the right side. Even in this case, PET alu PE, so no paper on the outside. In this case, it was PET, so 3 different materials, not possible to recycle together once you have a lamination among the 3 of them. And it was replaced again thanks to our extender solutions. Below on the left, you have a soft cheese, very typical in our market, so in the domestic market in Italy, which is called stracchino, with PA and PE based. Again, the 2 of them together, no longer possible to recycle them. In this case, again, extendo with a PP cast solution. And last, the example of which won the Sustainability Awards a couple of years ago, replacement of a soup structure, paper, alu PE with, again, a PP-based high barrier film. The second is Relife. Top on the left side, you see KitKat. This is a nice example of what we did in Australia. It was the first case which was actually presented to the Prime Minister in Australia, and it is the example of a closed loop. Yes, it's a closed loop experience which we carried out together, not only with the brand but with the converter, with the recycler, and the KitKat packaging was actually collected to go back and then chemically recycled. We got the granule from the polymer producer. We extruded the film. It was metallized, was sent to the converter, and then used again to wrap the KitKat. It was not for sale, but it was presented to the Prime Minister in Australia to show that it is possible, with the right infrastructure, to collect back soft packaging and take it back to be used again to wrap new fruit products. On the right side, we have some nice examples of a collaboration that is still ongoing with CFLEX. So we have been part of CFLEX starting in 2018, and with them, we've always supported the collaboration and the proof of concept that it is possible to go back to a film, even using mechanically recycled content, PP mechanically recycled, and collected from household waste. And the last one is a nice application which is made with ocean-bound plastic label film, which won the label Industry Global Awards last year. So it's a tuna glass jar which has a PP label in it, which was produced with this ocean-bound plastic label film. Examples of transition from the rigid to the flexibles, we have here on the left the transition from a tray, rigid tray with minced meat, and it was actually there was a switch to a flow pack with a retailer in Germany to actually save and declare a benefit in terms of impacts of the packaging itself. And then, of course, stand-up pouches we believe that can contribute, of course, to the refill applications and to meet the requirements when it comes to that specific target. Last but not least, we mentioned the mandatory applications for compostable solutions. These are some of the applications that we already have in the market, thanks to our Nativia portfolio. So coffee, can be bakery products, fresh produce, you mentioned it, with the possibility to add barrier or not. So it is possible to go for multiple applications and to grow together with our customers in this type of solutions. I think it was all from my side. I'm not sure if I was in time or I used the last time that I had available, but thank you. I'm not sure if you have any questions. If we have time for questions, but if not, I can stay here and. Good. It means I was clear.